I cheated on my husband before his family gathering. I regret this so much. Although it is wrong, giving in to desire feels so good. I am the only one to blame for the position I am in right now. Have any of you found yourself in a situation like this? How did you come out of it? I know I have messed up and there's no way I can undo it. I, 40 and have been married to 46 for 12 years. My husband, Dan, works for a marketing agency. I'm a housewife. We have 2 boys who are 10 and 8 years old. I met my husband 15 years ago. I was a waitress at a restaurant/bar that was really trending those days, where he used to visit regularly with his friends. I always found him good looking. He always made a point to sit in my booths. One time, the other waitress tried to serve him, but he refused and requested for me. I waited for him to make a move, but nothing. One day I thought I'm gonna ask him out myself. He beat me to it though. He was my last customer that evening. After my shift was over, I came out to find him waiting for me. He asked me for my number, and a few days later when he texted me asking me out on a date, it was an instant yes. We dated for 3 years before we decided we should get married. Our marriage was everything one could dream of. I worked for a little while after our marriage, but when I conceived my eldest son, I stopped going to work. I've been a housewife since then. My family life was going extremely well. My friends always used to tell me that they are jealous of me. My husband loved me. We had 2 wonderful children. It was really a dream life till I had to go and up everything. My husband at work requires him to travel a lot of time. It wasn't much of a deal since I always had the boys and was never left alone, even when I wanted to. My boys went to boarding school this summer. I didn't want them to go so young, but it was a tradition in my in-laws' family. My husband had gone too. I started feeling lonely after my boys went to boarding school this summer. My husband was out for work mostly as well. All my friends were also busy in their life. It also started to feel really boring. I thought of joining some classes. It was the best way to pass time. I browsed some classes near me and finally decided that I should join art classes. I always had an interest in art in my school days, but never got the time to continue it. I had all the time in the world now. I went to the website of this art class near me. An artist who was in his 30s was conducting these. I quickly filled all the formalities and enrolled myself quickly. In the evening when Dan and I were having dinner, I told him that I was joining an art class. He was excited for me. "You should explore your hobbies, Han," he said happily. I truly had won the lottery for the best husband. He was always so supportive. The day for my first class finally came and I went there. I was quite nervous. At the age of 40, starting something new felt quite intimidating, but Dan was right. I needed to explore this for me, I thought as I looked in the mirror. I wore a white sundress. I didn't want to look too uptight or anything. I finally reached the location. It was a studio. It wasn't either too big nor too small. It was a good place. I was the first one to reach there, so I admired the interior and everything. It had a full-length mirror on one of the walls. Whoever designed the interior of this place had a good choice. "Found something you like?" a voice broke my attention. I turned to look and found a young man standing near the door. He smiled at me and I gave him a small smile back. "I'm John, your teacher," he introduced himself. This young man was going to teach me art. Maybe this wasn't such a good idea after all. I introduced myself to him as well. John smiled at me and told me to take a seat. John started asking me what I liked more, drawing or painting. I told him that I liked both. "It's all right with you, I'll start by explaining the basics to you." I was confused as I was the only person there. "Aren't we going to wait for other people?" I asked him. He told me that I was the only one in this class. "I only take one-on-one classes," he said smoothly. I must have missed that on the website. John started explaining to me the basics. He told me what all objects will cover, etc., etc. There was something about John. I couldn't pinpoint it, but he gave me a different energy. He would give me complete attention since I was the only person in the studio, but it was also the way he looked at me. Like I was special or something. It felt weird to get this type of attention from a stranger, but let's be honest here, I also enjoyed it a bit. Whenever I was drawing something or painting something, John would come and sit closer to me. He got really close to me a few times. He would hold my hands and show me where I was going wrong. It didn't feel like a normal teaching equation, but I couldn't tell him to maintain some distance. I didn't want to. I always looked forward to going to the studio. Even though I had scheduled classes twice a week, John had told me that I was always welcomed here to hang out or to draw something. Whenever I used to visit the studio, John would always treat me with such warmth and gentleness. It felt good. Even though, it also felt wrong to receive this type of attention from a stranger when I had a loving husband back home. Dan had gone out of station for a work-related thing. I thought that instead of being alone at home, I should head to the studio. I got ready, putting a bit extra than I would have normally put in. I picked a cute dress and also applied my favorite red lipstick. I told myself, I'm doing it for me, but a part of me knew that I was lying. I went to the studio and found John there. He was surprised to see me. I told him that I would like to draw something here if that's all right with him. He said it was perfectly fine and we both took our seats. I was engrossed in the piece I was working on that I didn't realize when John came and stood behind me. It was only when he placed his hands on my shoulders that I looked up at him. Beautiful, he said. Oh, thank you, it isn't completed yet though, I thanked him. He laughed then. That piece is great, but I was talking about you. You look beautiful tonight, oh. I was stunned. Thank you, I guess, I told him quietly. I started feeling nervous suddenly. Even though I had a teeny tiny crush, as the kids today call it, it still felt inappropriate. John took my sketchbook from my hand and kept it on the side. He started massaging my shoulders. What are you doing? I whispered, my voice coming shaky. Just give you a massage, relax your shoulders for me. I didn't know if I was imagining it or his voice was more husky than normal. I told him it's not appropriate, but he wasn't letting it go. His hands went to my back. I haven't been intimate with Dan lately since he was always busy with his work, and I was always busy with the kids. We didn't spend time together like that anymore. So as John kept massaging me, I realized that I missed it, and now when I was getting it, I didn't want it to end. That night I made the biggest mistake of my life. I went to his home with him. My conscience knew that I was doing the wrong thing, but desire took over and conscience died. Don't get disgusted, but John gave me something I was missing. The way he touched me aroused the desire inside me. I slept with him. I came back home the next morning. I left John's house while he was sleeping. I couldn't look at anyone. I felt so horrible. John kept telling me how he couldn't get enough of me and wanted more time with me. But my guilt wouldn't let me spend more time with him. As I came to my home with memories of my family, the guilt increased tenfold. I'm a horrible woman, I told myself. I have a loving husband and a wonderful family. I shouldn't make such decisions. I did my household work and decided that I will never keep foot in that studio ever again. My thoughts got interrupted when I got a call from John. Why did you leave like that? He asked me. I told him that what happened between us can never happen again. He refused to let it go. He told me that if I didn't go back to his house, he would come to mine. John seemed the type of guy who would actually do it. I was sure he had my address from the information I put in the form when I joined his classes. I didn't want him to come to my home. I didn't want my neighbors to see him and ask questions. I didn't want to risk something like that, so I decided to go to his house and tell him face to face that whatever happened between us can never happen again. I reached John's house at 8 o'clock sharp. My resolution to tell him my decision dissolved when he opened the door and kissed me instantly. I wasn't used to this urgency and passion, and it felt so good. I feel awful for that. John treated me with such warmth, but at the same time he used to treat me with so much passion. I missed this passion with my husband. It was there in the beginning, but as responsibilities increased, it went away. You could have it now, John told me, and even though I knew the right thing was to leave his place, I couldn't. I stayed there. I thought of giving myself one more night and that would be it. The next morning, John woke up before me. I can't have you running away again, he told me when I asked how he's up early. He brought me coffee and put my hair behind my ears in a soft touch. I know you feel guilty because of this, but you don't have to, he told me. He explained to me how we all need something in our life to have some fun. It's not right, I told him. He kissed me and asked if it felt wrong to me. I couldn't say yes. Being with John felt right in some way. He gave me passion and urgency. Maybe he was right and I did need it. I was always the dutiful wife. The good mother. I could have this for me just for a little while, I thought stupidly. I told John that if we agreed to continue this, we have to be secretive about it. We came to a conclusion as to how we will meet on days when Dan will be out for work. Dan wouldn't even notice this, I thought in my head. I left John's house and came to my home. Dan was going to come home that night. I did some cleaning around the house and then prepared dinner for him. Dan came home around evening. While we were having dinner, he told me that his mother's birthday was coming up and they were having a party at their villa. My mother-in-law's birthday has always been a huge celebration. The whole family, they have a pretty big family, comes together and celebrates it. Everyone loves it because it's those few times when the entire family comes together. I told him that I was going to get her birthday gift soon. The day of the family gathering came. I hadn't met John for over a week by that time. I got a message from him in the morning telling me that he wants to meet me. I told him that I couldn't meet that day as I had to go for some family event. He kept insisting that I go to his house, even for a little while. He was so persistent that I gave in and told him I'll be there. I made some excuse to Dan that I forgot to pick the birthday gift. I made my way to John's house. As soon as I made my way inside his house, he started kissing me. I kissed him back and we went to his bed. After an hour later, I realized that I had to rush back home as I needed to go to my in-laws' house as well. I rushed to my house. Dan reached the house 10 minutes after me. We got ready and went to their place. Dan told me that I looked really beautiful and the guilt came back. I smiled at him but felt awful. The evening was amazing. All of my in-laws are really warm and kind to me. They have always been kind to me since the beginning of my relationship with John. My mother-in-law told me that she's happy to see Dan so happy with me. She has always been a mother figure to me. Her being happy for us made me feel so regretful for what I'm doing with her son. We came back from their house. The guilt I was feeling overwhelmed me. I didn't realize it when I started crying. Dan asked me what was wrong. I told him that I missed the boys. It felt weird lying to the man I have spent 15 years of my life with. The guilt consumed me and I decided that I was never seeing John again. Giving in to the temptation felt good, but I cannot hurt Dan. I stopped texting John and stopped picking his call. I thought everything was going to get better, but I couldn't have been more wrong. One day, when I opened my text messages, I saw intimate pictures of me and John. The pictures were taken from an angle where it was clear that it was me. John had sent me this. He asked me to pay $50,000 or he would send the pictures to my husband. Hell, that bastard trapped me. I was so livid. How could he do this? But the fault was mine. I trusted a complete stranger and looked where it got me. Karma was a bitch, I was sure of it now. I didn't have the money he was asking for. I also don't want those pictures to break my family. If anyone has any suggestions as to what I should do, please leave in the comments. I'm in desperate need of help. Update. It has been more than 6 months. John kept blackmailing me initially, like someone said in the comments. I told him that I wasn't scared of him and I would take him to the police if he continued to harass me. It didn't work because he knew he found my weakness. I couldn't give him that much money even if I wanted to because I didn't have it. If I asked Dan for such a big amount suddenly, he would have figured something was going on. I asked John to give me some time to figure something out, but that bastard didn't listen to me. He sent those pictures to my house to scare me. He must have thought that I would get scared and give him the money instantly, but instead of me, Dan found that envelope. He was home early from work while I was at the grocery store. I came home to find him sitting with the envelope in front of him. I didn't understand what was going on, but one look at his face and I knew that he knew. I didn't even need to see the envelope, but I did. There was no point in lying anymore, so I told Dan the complete truth. I told him how guilty I felt. I couldn't stop the tears coming to my face. I begged him for his forgiveness, but he showed no signs of any emotions. He left the house shortly after that. I stayed awake waiting for him, but he never came back home. I texted him as to where he is. He wasn't picking up my calls or answering my texts. I contacted his friends, but no one knew where he went. I just received a text from him the next morning to never contact him again. Just like that, my whole life crumpled in front of me. It hurt a lot knowing I had no one to blame for it except myself. 2 days later, I got divorce papers from our lawyers. Dan had requested for full custody of the boys. I called him up, grateful when he picked up. I begged him to not do this. I asked him to not take the kids away from me. I can't let them get raised by a woman I hate so much, he said without any emotion. In all these years, he had never spoken to me like this. I knew I had f***ed up everything and there was nothing I could do to salvage it now. I got a call from the lawyers telling me to leave the house by the next morning as it was legally Dan's property. John called me once again trying to scare me, but I told him that I had already lost everything and to f*** off. It felt slightly better. My sons refused to talk to me as well. Dan must have told them what had happened. No surprise that they hate me as well. I left the house in tears and have been living with my parents who also don't talk to me and have told me to find a place for myself as soon as possible. Anyone reading my story, I just want to tell you that even though giving in temptation feels so good, don't let your conscience die. I made that mistake and there isn't a moment in my life when I don't regret it.